rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Lights, camera, action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta...
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH-LP 103.5 FM, New Haven.
Good morning. Happy Friday to all. We are so delighted once again to bring our group back together to continue this discussion. As we always start out, I always have to give thanks to my partner, Tom Ficklin, who is recovering. He's been in touch, he's doing well. Actually, as a session I think he's going to this morning, he hit me last night. So we continue to pray for his speedy recovery, and we thank him for the opportunity that he gives us to do this show. So this is the Real Talk Show. We are part 2 of a session speaking on violence prevention in New Haven, and we wanted to give a female perspective to that thought. And so we're so happy that 3 of our guests were able to return this time, and we're going to get right into the discussion because we know how quick the time goes, and we really enjoy the comments and the advice and the suggestions that we get from our panel. So we just were debriefing a little bit before we started the show, and I just want to start off that way. I want everybody to know that their thoughts and views are welcomed by our show. That's the reason why we call it Real Talk. We have to get to the real issues. We have to have the real conversations that sometimes people are scared to have. And on this show, we're not scared to have those comments and those suggestions. So we're going to break back into our discussion. A very lively discussion last time, and toward the end we were getting to 2 main topics that I want to kind of expound upon. We were talking about getting that village back together, and that's a big part of this whole scenario. And then we also were talking about a little bit about the parenting role, and we know that there are a lot of single moms in our community that are raising young men, and we have 2 great examples on our panel today in Barbara and Shirley. I know their families personally, and so I know it was a struggle, but they made it through, and they have productive young men in our community today, and we're very proud of the example that they've set. But we want to kind of get in this discussion of how do we help getting this village back together, because everybody's not going to have the same support basis. And it was so funny that I saw something on Facebook the other day that kind of mentioned that. It said, we all are in the same race, but we don't have the same shoes. Exactly. And so we can't always make it to where it's a uniform or it's just general. It's not that way. Everybody's family and everybody's situation is very different. So how do we work along in communities to bring the resources all together so that no matter what the family situation may be for one particular family, but there's benefits and there's support for everybody. So we're gonna get started as we normally do. I don't think we need to do introductions. You guys should know these great women that we have on this panel today, but I'll just give them a brief second to say their names and what's the passion on the mind this morning. Bernard, as always, my co-host, gets to do the introductions and get us started so we can get into this robust discussion. Bernard?
Last time I went with the passion, at least the last time, and I had her last, so I'm gonna have her go first this time and let her come in and just reintroduce herself and her passions.
Good morning. Briefly, I'm Evelise Ribeiro, a member of this community that I love and cherish. And basically, my passion is to just uplift my community, try to bring peace and order back to the community, and show our young people that they are loved and worthy. So that's it in a nutshell.
Loved and worthy. All right, I go with that. And you know what, I'm gonna tell you, I love the radical part. And he say passion, but I love the radical part of this next guest, and that's Miss Barbara Fair. I listened to her on TV a few times and I seen her in action, and I'm telling you, she is the real deal. But I will let her come in and just give you just a background on herself.
Hi, my name is Barbara Fair, and I was born and raised in New Haven. New Haven is my home, even though I live in West Haven, right outside of New Haven. New Haven is my home. It always will be. I'm always passionate about the well-being of what I consider still my family in New Haven. And so I'm more about, let's get to the root causes of why things happen, because I think we spend a lot of time on talking about things after it happens, like we have programming for people after there's been a shooting or after someone's been killed. But let's talk about the root causes and how do we stop this from happening in the first place. And so that's my passion. Let's get on that topic.
We about to go there. We are about to go there. And you know, when I think of history, when I think of historians, when it comes to a true historian of this community, I believe there is nobody like Miss Shirley Ellis West. Please tell us about this.
Thank you. Wait, thank you for that. You know what? And I do have a lot of history and some of that's because, you know, I've been around for a minute. But thank you, Bernard, for that introduction. I truly feel blessed to be introduced in that way. So I'm Shirley Ellis West, yes, and I've been in the community for a very long time, working, you know, for a nonprofit organization, but also, you know, working civically and socially and just doing my part, you know. I mean, because I'm a strong believer. My passion really lies within, you know, the fact that I believe that each of us, I don't care who we are, what we have, I think that we all have, I think that we all have something that we can contribute. And, you know, and so we might have to search really deep to find it, but we all have something that we can contribute to support each other. And you know what, Maurice, you said it very clearly, you know, we're all in this together, but we don't have the same, you know, we're not all working with the same resources. And you know what, and this is about helping children, youth, families to be strong, you know, to sustain themselves, to realize their potential and to imagine what life should be for them. And we all can do our part in the community to help them get to that place. Because what does somebody do? Somebody help each and every one of us, right? Mm-hmm. And so my passion is just within all those things. But you know, I'm here.
Okay, great. So let's get started. So one thing that was on my mind, and I'm gonna ask to the panel, is I actually went to a wedding yesterday, and it was a friend of mine, so we grew up together. And as we were taking pictures, we just were having some conversation, and the conversation was about how we grew up and certain things that we're seeing that there is no way in the world that our mom or dad would allow that to happen. And we just were kind of just, it didn't even, back then, it was so funny, it wasn't even about the physical discipline. It could be a look. It could be, my mom told us, listen, we're going in this store. You're not getting nothing. Don't touch nothing. You better not act a fool. And we knew it. And it was like, okay, so now you're in this nice big store with all these nice things and you can't touch nothing. You're not getting nothing. And the discipline was there for you, knew not to carry on in any particular way. How are we going to get back to this village to where there were rules and regulations that you just knew off the rip that you could not violate from it, whether it was either parent, mother or father, or if you just had mom, you knew. We were street light kids. When that street light came on, if she had to go on that porch and yell, you might not be out for the next couple of days. So, I mean, how do we get back to that village that was helping our young people come up, you know, very discipline and in a situation where there was always heavy disciplining in those homes? How do we get?
Maurice, I don't know like how others feel, but I get it, and you're right. But I'm not sure that based on this generation of parents that we'll ever get back to what we got. All right. Yeah. So, and I don't think that we should be I don't think that we should be trying to get back to what we necessarily got in the way we got it, right? So discipline, structure, all of those things are important in growth, development, and just raising our children. However, if you think about who the parents of this generation are, many of them didn't get what we got. I mean, I think that's fair to say. And so in order for me to give you something, I would have to have gotten it myself. So I think the question for us in the community is that, and as leaders, is how do we understand what the needs of this family, this generation of families need, and then get to work on supporting that, because moms today, look, I'm a grandmother of 9. People look at me and be like, "You a what?" Yeah, I'm a grandma. Even grandmas don't reflect what grandmas used to reflect, right?
You're right.
I mean, and so I think that it's an opportunity for us to move forward based on what this generation of families look like and need. And so that's just kind of how I'm thinking.
Okay, so then we're going to be taking notes because, as we said, this is going to be a series of getting suggestions that we can turn into action. So first one I got is needs assessment. So there's a family needs assessment that needs to happen in our city. What are the family resource deficits that we have, and how can we get those resources to those families? They're not going to be the same way we grew up in the other generation, but how do we still gap those needs? So needs assessment for local families is a note I'm taking. Okay, Barbara, you're next.
For me, a lot of it goes back to basics. What's the basics human needs for people to feel like a sense of happiness? And some of those basic needs are food, shelter, feeling connected, clothing, things like that. But I think connectedness is so important. And I think that a huge part of that is missing. And we have to find a way to get back to where people feel connected. We look at kids and they join gangs, and we look at how, to us, what a horrible thing that is. But what we need to look at is, why are they joining the gang? If they felt connected to their families and their community, there'd be no need to connect to another part of society. But if you have nothing and our human need is to feel connected, then we have to fill that void. How do we make our kids feel connected to this society, a society that cares about them? And that's really important. And we show we care in word, not just in words, but also in deeds.
Okay, so we have a human need for the sense of happiness and connectiveness. Okay. You're next, Ms. Ribeiro.
So when I think about the difference from when we were raised and when we grew up to today, I think about some of the things that we don't require of our young people. For example, in my day and age, not going to school or not going to church is not an option in my house. Not meeting my friends or their parents and family is not an option in my house and with my friends and family. If I'm going to hang out with someone, my mom needed to know who they were and who they came from. Not to judge, but just to know who I was associating myself with along, with my brother. So I think that we kind of need to get back to that with the village. We need to know who our kids are associating with, and we need to talk to them about it, not to judge, not to cast asperities against their friend circle, but just to get an idea of what are you doing. I just the other day, for example, just talking with a young person, I just took the time to ask them, well, what are you doing? What are you thinking? They're working on a school project, and their basic answer was like a school project. But I had to dig further to talk to them and say, what is it about? And then say to them, well, when this project comes to fruition, let us in your circle know so we can come and support you. Not that this person doesn't have a support system at home, but let him know that he also has a support system outside of home. I think that's important. We're trying to get this village back together. We're going to have to not just raise our own children, but reach out to other children that we see, regardless if they come from a one-parent home, a no-parent home, or two-parent home. Just to say, hey, you have people here that want to support you and see you get on the right path. So I think that's the basic thing in terms of getting this village back together. You got to reach one and teach one.
Okay, so I got from that the putting together that support base for the youth. So it's not just the actual parents, because it could be one particular situation where there's only one parent there. So where is the community support base that's going to help that young, whether male or female, grow in this community and make sure they have support? It's so funny when you mention that, it brings me back to one time going to either right across the street from the Walter Pop baseball field. And just this one kid, as he was walking toward to get refreshment, he had his head down. And so I went over there and I sparked up a small conversation with him. And he was explaining that he felt sad because his dad couldn't be at the game. And so whatever the circumstance may be that why the father couldn't be at the game, we got to make sure that there's somebody there that makes him feel proud that he's at the game. And that has to happen. And so as we look at that kind of crosses me over. And I don't know if Bernard, you had something that you wanted to say. If you want to, you can chime in. But now that crosses over to this main thought that I want us to dwell on is how do we, and I think Shirley hit it the hardest, how do we help someone see something they never saw? And I think in our communities, that's something that's tough because we're a very visual community. Whatever we see or whatever we're around or whatever we know or whatever we can put our hands on, we do well when we can do that. But what about those things that we can't see the future outcome of a process and we don't trust it because we've never done it? How do you get someone to kind of fit into a picture of understanding something that they've never seen before? Because I echo what Barbara says. I knew when it was like when I was trying to go toward the gang and be with the fellas, it was a sense of not everything completely in my particular life that made me feel what was appealing that they were stating to me and running, as we call our dogs, running hand in hand with guys every day, picking them up, getting in the car, we're doing this, we're doing that. So how do we help young people feel that sense of worth and connectiveness that they don't have at home so that they don't go to the streets to get that? That seems like a good place to be on a conversation, but I'm gonna let Bernard jump in before you got the panelists start.
As I was listening to the three of you, it began to help me to realize something that Miss West said. When it comes that we might not be able to get back to the structure we had as when we were young, but it's parts of that structure that should never have left, that still should be present, and that is the presence of strong women and strong men in these communities that are not afraid to open their mouth. You have one or two people that might stand up and fight or show up for particular things, but it's one or two people, and it's always the same, but it's never that group. When I grew up in Michigan, I had like 20 Black men that would step in and pop you in the mouth. I mean, right off, if you was one of those kids that were really talented or whatever, I mean, they was in you. And and they weren't afraid to take you in the closet. Mr. Coleman is one, Maurice Coleman, my middle school basketball coach. He followed me all the way through college and said the same thing that from the first day he met me, don't have me take you in the closet. And he would take you in the closet. And the thing is that he was the only one that came out most of the time. So the thing is that, but we had that. And these men need to stop playing. I'm serious. Stop playing. Don't come to me playing. These young boys need you to really step in, especially those young brothers that don't have their fathers in the home. You know, the ones that have their fathers in the home, it's a little different. But those that don't have it, there's a lot of families in these neighborhoods, fathers is nowhere to be found or don't want to be found. And then the second is those strong women. Women today, some of them, just like men, you can't beat one of them up without the other. You got some very soft women in this community that don't want to open their mouths. And then you have the strong ones left to try to feed and help those that don't want to step up to the plate and want to really kind of step in those places where these young ladies really need it. I can be a father to my daughter, but my daughter can't be complete without her mother. And they need the both of them together. Even if they're not in the same household, they still need the both of them together as a team, household or not, running and helping establish things in these young people that they're not getting today. Because what's left is these young people establishing themselves, and they have yet to grow to know what that really is. So they grow where they actually, some have shown them that this is the best place for you to go. Come sell some drugs, come smoke some weed, come get drunk. You know what I mean? Let's go out and shoot up some people. Let's go out and rob some people. You know, that's what they're learning. So they don't have that simultaneous connection between both parents or some strong people in that community to step up and say, this ain't gonna happen on my block, bro. And be real about it. And not be afraid, hey, it is what it is. Because guess what? It is what it is. It is happening. And until we stop it, it's going to continue to happen. Everybody looking for the police. One day you like the cops, the next day you don't. Well, you can't go both ways. Either you like them or you don't. And you can't expect cops to step in when all they hear is police brutality. Not to say that it doesn't happen. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you can't be expecting cops to show up when all we do is beat them down. And then when something happens, we want them there. Then we don't want them there. So that means the people within that community have to step up. Where are the men? The real men. I'm not talking about these soft boys. Give me some men that have backsides on them, that are not afraid to say, hey, bro, this is my block. It's not going to happen today. Let me show you something better. And until they stay consistent with that, we'll just be on the call just talking and writing and did nothing out of it.
And that's a huge part. You know, we have enough people saying, don't do this, don't do that. But what are we offering them in exchange for what they're doing?
That's right.
Look at the community we grew up in. We had a lot of recreation, a lot of things for kids to do. Everyone knew each other. What do we have to offer the kids today?
Right.
When we want to look at what kind of things that we need to do to bring our village back, a lot of it's like we've just sat back and just allowed the whole community to be completely changed. Yeah. When I grew up, it was all Black businesses. Our families were the grocery stores, the carpenters, the mechanics. They were everything. Now we have just sat back and just allowed other people to come in, take over the community. We have nothing. So what do we show our kids? That they don't, that they look at, well, we probably not going to have anything either. So we got to get what we can get. So we got to work on providing some resources and less of that talk and more of that walking.
So that brings me to the point of, we're talking about the resources. We know that we're always labeled as low resources in our local communities. But then we talk about a community that had resources and kind of lost the resources, right? Or lost the power, or however we look at it. So I think my point is going to always be the reverse side. How do you get back to that? Because right now, let's think about it. When I grew up, we were just two friends were talking the other day. We had Boys Club, we had the YMCA and the YWCA. We had the Q House. So we had maybe
movie theaters, bowling centers.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So in each section of the town, no matter what part of the town you grew up in, there was somewhere not too far from where you live that you could go to get recreation. And I think, sometimes people, they undercut that thought because they thought as well, can't just the kids play, they're not, what else they're going to learn? What people don't understand is we all have stressors, no matter who you are, no matter what age group you're in. And you have to have a way to release that. And if you don't have a way to release that, it comes back on and it becomes to work on your mental, and it also works on your physical. So since they've taken these things, it seemed like a way, or we allow them to lose them, that's where I come up with the thought of, how do you help someone see something that they never experienced? Like, our kids in this generation have never experienced a real Freddie Fixer. Freddie Fixers have 100,000 people out in Dixville Avenue. Our kids will never get to see that. So how do we get them to understand the joy and just of a weekend that a whole, not just our town of New Haven, people came from New York, Philly, they came from all over into New Haven on this particular weekend to have association, connection, enjoyment of our culture. And this has been robbed from our young people who don't even know what that's like. They don't know what the Hill House cross basketball game at the Coliseum is like. They'll never see those things. So how do we help them to see that you live in a community that's rich in resources? If we all work together, we can do it together and get these resources back to our community. I know you guys are seeing those houses down at Downtown Apartments by Worcester. Those are multi-million-dollar projects that we have nothing to do with. And it's so my thought is to the panel, how are we going to get involved in these things that create the resources for our community that is so siloed in our community right now? I want to start with Ms. Ribeiro.
So I just had like a lot of different thoughts running through my head when you've been speaking. But one thing I think about is we certainly should focus on our community and what's happening in our community. But if it's not necessarily happening now, and we know that it's happening in other communities, particularly African-American communities, and those things are resources, or those events or things are available for our children to participate in, sometimes we're going to have to take the leap and say, okay, we don't have the Freddie Fixer Parade in New Haven for you to see, but there's still the West Indian Parade going on in another town that's just as spectacular as what we used to have. Take a child to that event so they can see what's going on there. Or we're not able to do the nature hikes in our community because we don't have those organizations that are sponsoring that, but that's a free event, for example. Take a child to another locale and have them experience that. I think that we have to take that responsibility because we don't all have the financial resources to build these things up individually. And sometimes it just takes a long time collectively to try to do that. But let's just tap into what's out there that we know is out there that we can expose our children to, that they may not be exposed in our community. A lot of our children have not left their neighborhoods, go anywhere. They have not left the city. I've heard of people who haven't even ventured out to like a Branford or Hartford or Stanford. They just stay here. But when we hear of different events that are happening, let's take a child along with us so they can be exposed to the different things. And we might learn something as well. When we go to those events, we might figure out, well, hey, how can I bring this type of event or this type of organization back to my community to help the youth? So it's just the basics. I mean, I believe that we have to take the individual responsibility before we can do the collective responsibility to do these things. So I'm just going to go back to that. We have to make the determination that I want to make a difference. One child, and then two children, and then so on and so forth, and just expose those children to what's out there. Because you're not going to know, like you said, you're not going to know what you don't know. But once you see it, even if it's not in your block, in your city, but you see it that it's happening somewhere else, then you are exposed. And that's when the wheels start turning in your head about, there is a different life out there. There is something else out there for me to try to figure out. So I would just go back to that. Just see what's out there and see how you can bring it back to your community or bring the children to it.
So Barbara, this is the one I want this question to focus on. So when there's no unity, we turn to self-preservation. And that's what happened in Black communities. And people don't want to speak about that. If there's no unity, what's going to happen is I got to fend for my family. I can't worry about Barbara's family. I got to make sure my family's straight. If there's no unity. So how do we get a concept of unifying communities if people are in a self-preservation mode?
That's very difficult for me to answer, because it's one of the things that I think about a lot. Like, we have a lot of resources in our community. We have millions of dollars coming into our community. It's how are we spending them? Like Bernard was talking about the police, for example. I don't look to the police to solve problems. If I have an issue with somebody in my community, or I know my kids do, I try to go and let's talk to those people and see if we can work this thing out. Because when the police come in, situations turn completely different. So we talk about defunding the police, and what we're really saying is we'd like to see those millions of dollars that go into the police department, millions that people are making. We'd like to see some of that money come and provide some resources in our community that actually uplift our community. We have millions coming into different programs. How do we have results-based accountability to see if those programs are doing what they say they're going to do? So I wouldn't say we don't have resources. I just think we don't spend them in the right way to build our community up. We have millions of dollars coming into New Haven. We have to make demands to make sure that those resources are going to be used mostly to do the work that needs to happen in New Haven. And that's give our kids something to look forward to. Give them some jobs and opportunities. Summer jobs that the kids used to look forward to. All that stuff is gone. And we have to take responsibility for it being gone, because the kids in the suburbs are not suffering like our kids are, because their parents are making demands and they standing up to make sure those demands get met. But like you said, when it's about self-preservation, that's our killer, because it's about how do I hold on to my job and take care of my family. And if that means I can't say anything about anything else that's going around me, I'm going to do that, because it's all about me and my family.
Okay, so we brought up a great point that Barbara brought up, is the resources is not that they're not there, is how do we access them? And I want to turn this over to Shirley, because as a former alderwoman in our community, how do we access these funds? How do we get at the tables, and how do we sit at these tables to demand that? I'll just give you a great example. I'll never forget when I was on the fact that we have a police shooting range down the street on Sherman Parkway. And I was one of the people that was involved in that fight. And there was a suggestion of where it could go. And one suggestion was Branford. Mm-hmm. And they came out, about 500 residents came out to that first meeting to discuss it going to Branford. And I don't use any explicitives, but you all know what the answer was. And they never brought that conversation up ever again out there in Branford for that range to be out there. So how do we get to that point where our leverage and our bringing everybody together is going to be able to place us at those tables? And Shirley kind of touch on kind of how, when you were an alderwoman, what are some of the things that some of maybe our everyday person doesn't understand that has to go before the board before certain decisions are made in our community?
So first of all, the political process is probably one of our most powerful tools to use in the community when we think about advocacy and making sure our communities are getting what communities need, and that our communities are always at the table. So first, I think the first thing that we need to be able to understand is to share the information about, there are a number of boards that citizens can sit on in New Haven, a number of boards. I mean, I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's almost a board for every interest or everything that's relevant to the quality of our life attached to the Board of Aldermen's process. And if you don't get to sit on the board, the Board of Aldermen host a public meeting, twice a month, where you get to see what's on their agenda. outside of that, the committees will often meet and invite the public in to talk about what their concerns are, just like what happened in Branford. Our challenge is that quite often there's nobody in the room. There's nobody in the room at the Board of Aldermen meetings. There's nobody in the room at the Board of Education meetings. There's nobody in the room in a lot of these meetings that really if we're really interested in moving forward and having a voice and making a difference or impacting what happens in our community, we have to be in the room. Because if we're not in the room, then we're not even gonna be a part of the conversation. And when I say it's not enough for me to be in the room sitting at the table, it means and it requires that others in the community will have to show up, right? Because I may sit at 3 tables, but this isn't about me. This is about, the larger community, and how do we help those people making the decisions understand that this is what the larger community needs. This is what's important to us. These are the things that's not important to us. And so it's a matter of being present and being in the room. So the question is, how do we get the Mr. Jones and Miss James and Miss and Big Mama in the room when those conversations are being had, when those public testimonies are scheduled and being had. So how do we get that information to them so that so if I want to support, then I can support. The thing is, the information very seldom triggers down to those individuals that really need to be in the room. Now, whose responsibility is that? That responsibility should be the responsibility of the alderman for that ward. So just because it's not relevant to my ward necessarily does not mean that if the city's talking about a public works issue that's impacting the whole city, then in a public hearing is being held, we all should be in that room if that public works, if picking up that garbage is something that's important for me. Does that make sense? Because it's really about the information. We don't share information with those individuals that we're talking about right now, but we expect that they're going to participate. Well, I'm not going to participate if I don't know if I don't have the information. So
okay, so for the information sharing and the opportunity and also the responsibility, we all know that's not happening. Nope. I'll give you a prime example. We know that the city has 10 districts where they set up management teams. But so many of what I would say grassroots people feel that the management team has political agendas, already has agendas, so they don't attend the management meetings, which gives a lot of the information of the programs that are going on at the city. So if you're not at the table when they're explaining the where the programs are or when the meetings are, you're not going to know. And then we got to keep in mind, what about that mom that works 2 shifts to take care of her kids? She's not going to be able to make a 6 p.m., 7 p.m. meeting when she's going to be at work. So who's responsible for making sure that she also gets that information from what happened at the meeting? And that those things it brings me back to, I always tell people, be concerned about the things that are most important. Things that aren't important, don't be concerned about. Mm-hmm. We do that so many times in our community. To let me know if I'm having a party, I can get 100 to 200 people to get there. Mm-hmm. No problem. Everybody's seen me be involved in parties. I can get 100 to 200 people. Right. And then if I throw on free food, oh man, I might try to figure out if I'm gonna have enough for 500 people. But let it be a meeting that's going to be a decision on a building that they're going to sell, on some property that they're going to acquire. I don't got the time for that. Shirley, you go to that. You'll tell me how that went, Shirley. I gotta meet Bernard. Me and Bernard are going out for drinks. I don't got time to go to that meeting. So Shirley, you tell me how that went. And until we change that mindset that we got to be involved in the structure of what happens in our community, it's just going to unfold. I mean, we're getting to the point, no leadership. We're getting to the point of now the different committees and different things. We're looking at the faces on those like I think someone said, same faces.
The same faces.
Same
right?
faces. We know what their agendas are. We know that they're just, making sure that, they understand what's going on. They're not spreading the messages. The texting right now is the best way to get anybody's attention. There's no text messages going out saying, hey, they got a meeting over there. A lot of people don't even know that the Q house is done, ready to be opened. There's people that ride by it and they still looking. They don't know what happened. They don't know what's going on. And so that's where I always tell people our accountability is on the line right now, because we're not communicating with each other and we're not telling each other and we're not keeping this village together. And we can't blame that on anybody else. We got to take that responsibility. And so, the comments that you guys have had this morning, I've been taking notes. I got some good ones. And so I want to be able to see how we're going to push these into action. We got the needs assessments for the families in our community. We got the securing of happiness and connectiveness. We got the requirements of children that was brought up. I mean, this Rivera brought up a point that I always think about. There was no question was you going to church on Sunday. The only question was what you was going to wear. So all you probably had to try to figure out is what you were going to wear. But going wasn't even a thought. You're going. When we went to school, we were so happy to go to school when I went to Jackie Robinson. It's times I remember having a stomach ache that would have been no problem to make me not be able to go to school. My mama asked me at night, how did your stomach feel? And I was saying how bad it was. When she asked me in the morning, oh, I'm great, I'm good. It's time to go to school. It's time to go to school. And so if we lax our morals, our standards, if that's laxed in a community, what result you think you're going to get? I always try to get people to, what result do you think you're going to get? You think you're going to get budding kids and vibrant kids in a community that's lacks resources, lacks communication, lacks leadership? What are you going to get?
Maurice, I'm a great listener, and that's why so much stuff is going on in my head as you're talking. I'm thinking about the church. And again, we're talking about the kids not going to church, and we're not looking at what's the root cause of that. How have churches changed since when we went to church?
You're right.
You didn't have anybody in the pulpit almost embarrassing you if you didn't have tithes to pay, because that's not what you went to church.
That's right.
Look at the schools. Look how the schools have changed. So if kids don't want to go to school, instead of looking at they're not going to school, let's look at why are they not going to school? What has changed about that? So it's a lot. And then I just want to say, because I know time is going real fast, when Shirley was talking and you both were talking about people's involvement, I just want to say from my experience in many years of trying to do stuff for people in the community, I've experienced people not showing up, but I've also experienced people showing up and then the people in power didn't give them what they asked for anyway. So if that happens, why would they continue to show up? I'm also experiencing, especially lately, trying to up in Hartford, trying to pass in solitary confinement, asking different people, leaders in the community, that I know have powerful voices, asking them to, to come in with me and help push this, because the majority of the people that are being isolated are Black and brown. This is our issue. This is a church issue. This is a leadership issue. And what I found many times, and way too many times, is so many of those leaders are silenced by funding or a job. And when I asked them, can they come and stand with me? Well, I have this job now, I can't do it. Or, I've heard that so many times lately. And so this issue is so complex. It's not just, like you say, one box fits all. We got a lot.
But Barbara, that speaks to the self-preservation that you just mentioned. Because the thought is, if it's 50 of us ready to risk our job, that's totally different than 2 people ready to risk their job.
And Barbara, and I also want to, and I agree, but from my perspective, leadership is critical in moving forward in the community. But some of our leaders, they've been there way too long. It's time to revisit what leadership looks like in the community, because leadership that's there and not able to really advocate and be that voice, well, that's the first problem. And you're right. If my job is attached to my advocacy, well, that's a problem, right? Because I'm going to always be trying to make sure I eat, and not really do the right thing. And so one of the things that I remember about being on the Board of Aldermen was that, I was elected to the Board of Aldermen, and I wasn't obligated to anybody. I worked for a nonprofit that wasn't relying on city funding. They certainly did not raise the money to help me to support me in running. So once I got there, I always felt very independent minded. And it was always important to me to do the right thing, not just for my ward, which really didn't reflect a whole lot of people of color, but that was the blessing for me. I got to represent a diverse group of people. But at the same time, doing the right thing would quite often cause me some kind of grief. Right. And I remember times of standing there alone, right? People behind me, but ain't nobody standing there with me. Right. So you have to have a certain amount of courage, as that leader, but you most certainly cannot have your lifeline tied to that advocacy, because you're just never going to be effective as you can be. So.
Okay, so
Can I touch on one thing, Maurice? One thing that Shirley said when she spoke about, leaders being in the position too long. What we need to do, we have to build our leaders. I mean, that goes back to, we know that, this person has been leading this organization or has been on the board of alders or on a commission for a long time. It's our responsibility to go back and find the young people who have that interest but don't know what they need to do. And it goes back with talking with them and bring them. Shirley, you and I know with our experience in the NAACP, we were brought along by people who were involved, Maurice also, by people who were involved for a long time, who saw the passion in us and said, hey, come to this convention, come to this conference, take this leadership position.
That's right.
Not that we weren't necessarily elected, but this is what you're going to do. You're going to be the secretary. You're going to do this. And we learned trial by fire, and the passion in us grew. So that's what our responsibility as leaders in this community is, to find those young folks that have that passion, that untapped passion and untapped desire and goals, and help them to nurture that. So it's our responsibility, plain and simple.
Thank you, Evelyn.
So the connective change of leadership isn't happening. But Barbara brought up something that we got to really take into account too. If they never saw no change in the time that the older leaders have been leading, what is going to give them confidence that they can make change? So what they do a lot of times, I hear so many people say, I'm not getting involved in that politics. I don't get involved. I don't mess with that. And you don't understand that it's the process that's going to help you to get to change. And the process is not always going to be quick. I seen Barbara work on some things that took maybe 8-9 years for it to get some leverage on. I seen everybody on this panel work on certain things that it took 5, 6, 7 years to get leverage on. Ms. Ribeiro had to be a part of the police commissioners for quite some time before she got to be in lead. So it don't happen overnight, and we got to stop this automatic succession we want so quickly. We want everything so quick. We want everything so quick. And it doesn't happen that way. I mean, I went back to school when I was 40.
Right.
And so I didn't think, I first fear was, what if I'm in class with 19-year-olds and they talking way over my head? But I had to tuck that fear. Shirley had to tuck that fear. You had to be like, I'm coming to class and I'm getting my lesson and I'm going to advance. And we encourage each other when we see each other passing through the halls. And so once again, we wrap up so quickly on our show, but we brought up so many great points that I've definitely taken notes. I hope everybody up here is taking notes. And what we want to do is, what is going to be the next steps? Because that's the most important for us. Our next steps to action. We got to get some people in this political process. We got to get some mentoring. We got to get this village back together. But what is going to be the information sharing steps that's going to help that? Is there a way for us to get a text message group? Is there a way for us to get something that's going to help us to share this information to not only help the individuals know what's going on in our community, but also encourage our young people to get involved in the process? This is a work that we all have to be involved in. There's no exclusions from anybody. Everybody has to see a need to be involved. And so I, once again, thank this great panelist that we had today. This is the second time you guys have brought up so many great suggestions and thoughts that we should implement. I've written a lot of things down. I will be in contact with you guys. We're going to figure out a way to get this shared to our community and get this ball rolling properly. May you guys have blessed weekends. May we stay focused, because we see it's a lot going on in our national government, our city governments, warring, there's all kinds of things going on, but we have to stay focused and we have to build a way to get this information sharing properly out to all our communities. So that's the thought I want to leave you with. How are we going to information share with our community in a better way so that everybody has an opportunity to be involved? Everybody's word will be heard.
Maurice, before we close, can you write on your little pad one last thing? And just write focus groups. Focus groups, right?
Okay, focus groups. I got you. Right? I got you. To hear what, and that helps to hear what the community is thinking. And if we do them in the real community, grassroots setting, you will get a lot of answers. The most valuable process we can use to get information about what people really want and need. And what they don't know. They'll also tell you the things that they don't know. Which is cool. Okay, so we'll work on some.
Do I have 30 seconds to say something?
Yes, you got 30 seconds. Yeah.
I think it's important that we pay attention to what's going on in incarceration, because a lot of those young kids that are out here going wild have been in facilities locked down 22, 23 hours a day. That causes a lot of harm. So we better care about incarceration, because those people come back to our community.
And those are our tax dollars that we have a lot to say about.
Yeah.
Okay, we've had a great show. I thank you
everybody.
Again.
Have a good time. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend. And let's look to this. Let's look to this follow-up.
This is Harry Droz, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM.
Rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition. This new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going. Better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gonna be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up.